So go. All right, this is a special afternoon edition. It's actually no different than it would be on a Saturday meeting. But the light, we may run out of a little bit of light here. At any rate, we're on page 20 of the record of the orally transmitted teachings translated by Burton Watson. It is chapter 2, Expedient Means, page 20, 8 important points. Let's dive in. Point 1, regarding the Expedient Means chapter, translator's note. So this is like a little prelude before we get into the actual text of the chapter, of the note, of the Expedient Means chapter. Translator's note. According to words and phrases, according to Tentai, there are 3 types of Hoben, or expedient means. The first is known as Hoyu Hoben, or adaptations of the law expedient means, teachings that were preached in accordance with people's capacities and tastes. They stress the truth of impermanence and the severing of attachment to the phenomenal world and correspond to Hinayana and early Mahayana. My parrot is joining us as we speak. The second is called Notsu Hoben, or expedient means that can lead one in. Teachings that the Buddha preached as a gateway to the true teaching. The third is called Himyo Hoben, or the secret and wonderful expedient means, which corresponds to the ultimate truth. That's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Secret and wonderful refers to the fact that the Buddha concealed the truth for the first more than 40 years of his preaching life, explaining it only in the Lotus Sutra. Unlike the first 2 expedients, the third type not only leads people to the truth, but simultaneously contains the truth. Have you ever heard of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo? Oh, chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's what that is. Okay, so words and phrases. Now we're getting into Tentai's comments, and then the Daishonen's perspective of them. Words and Phrases of Volume 3 states, the Ho of Hoben expedient means secret. The Ben means wonderful. Wonderful leads to secret. This is identical with the truth, which is kept secret. When we examine what is meant by the priceless jewel sewn into the lining of the man's robe, chapter 8, Prophecy of Enlightenment for 500 Disciples, we see that it is in no way different from the jewel in the top knot of the king, chapter 14, Peaceful Practices. And the man who is called a hired laborer is in fact no different from or apart from the rich man's son. They're the same person, actually, in that parable. Chapter 4, Belief and Understanding. All of these similes point to what is secret, what is wonderful. And what it is about each of these things is there's a treasure that the recipient is unaware that they already possess, that they ultimately discover through a process of having to go through certain circumstances, okay? For us, Himyo Hoben opens that door and immediately establishes a relationship with the law that's eternal when we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. You cannot not attain Buddhahood once you've heard the name and the words of the truth and you've embraced them at all, for even a moment, It is, as the Lotus Sutra says, only I, Shakyamuni, understood the law's characteristics, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions do likewise. So all the Buddhas understand the characteristics of this law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Stop, no need to speak. My law is wonderful and difficult to ponder. And he's talking about the theoretical concept of the Lotus Sutra here. Don't forget we're in expedient means. My law is wonderful and difficult to ponder. Therefore, the secret is used to explain that. Therefore, the term secret. Okay. Stop, no need to speak. My law is is wonderful and difficult to ponder. So he's saying this is very complicated and you really have to give it thought and contemplation. Therefore, the term secret is used to explain the Ho of Hoben. It's not really a secret. It's just not spoken of freely and loosely because it's too complex to do so. Therefore, the term secret is used to explain the Ho of Hoban, and the term wonderful is used to explain the Ben. This is, in fact, the meaning that underlies this chapter, so it is called the Expedient Means chapter. On the words and phrases, which would be Miolo, Volume 3 says, the third type of expedient means is characterized as secret and wonderful. Because it can be termed wonderful, it is identical with the truth. In other words, it is the truth. It's the same thing as the truth. The perfect teaching, don't forget that perfect teaching encompasses everything, all things, from all times, all throughout history, on into the infinite, endless future. The perfect teaching is regarded as identical with the truth, which it is because it contains everything. That's the reason it is the truth. But the three teachings, the Tripitaka, the connecting, and the specific, which are the preceding teachings of the pre-Mahayana, or the pre-Mahayana, they're Mahayana, the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings of Mahayana, are characterized as not identical with the truth. They're not identical with the truth. Therefore, it is in contrast to these non-identical teachings that the teaching of the Lotus Sutra is characterized as being identical with the truth. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, that was all Tentai, says, the priceless jewel mentioned in the passage of commentary from words and phrases is the jewel sewn into the lining of the robe, which is the same as the jewel in the king's top knot. And the hired laborer is absolutely identical with the rich man's son. But in the end, persons who slander the law and fail to have faith in it are followers of the provisional teachings outside of the body of the truth. Okay, which is these teachings that I just mentioned. Okay, when he said the Tripitaka, the connecting, and the specific, those are earlier Mahayana teachings. That's where the other competing schools come from. Okay, he's saying the teachings represented by the two types of expedient means known as adaptations of the law, and those that can lead one in. Okay, so the sutras that almost express Buddhahood, but fall short of actually doing it, okay? Only the lotus fully exposes it, hidden in the depths, as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, from the perspective of Nichiren. It doesn't exist anywhere else. For that reason, such persons cannot recognize that the two jewels or the two persons in the above similes are the same and no different from each other. They seem to be two different characters, but actually we're all the same thing. We're all human beings. All these stories, we could exchange ourselves with any of the individuals. Now, Nichiren and his followers who recite Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are observers of the secret and wonderful expedient, the secret and wonderful expedient means teachings that are within the body of the truth, okay? But they get us closer to a correct understanding of the correct teaching. Therefore, after the title of the sutra, Myoho Renge-kyo, comes the chapter entitled Expedient Means. In explaining the statement in words and phrases that is identical with the truth, which is kept secret, in his On the Words and Phrases, Volume 3, so Miolo again, Miolo says, the perfect teaching is regarded as identical with the truth. The perfect teaching is regarded as identical with the truth. And if identical means the perfect teaching, then this must be another name for the Lotus Sutra, perfect teaching. Identical must indicate the truth that ordinary people are identical with the highest level of being, or the Buddha of the true aspect of all phenomena. Perfect refers to the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Though the words identical and perfect are different, they are each another name for wonderful. Okay, so the principle refers to the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. That's Ichinen Sanzen, right? Okay. Though the words identical and perfect are different, they are each another name for wonderful, the wonderful law. That is, that all living beings are in fact the Buddha of the true aspect of all phenomena is a wonderful thing, an unfathomable thing. But persons who slander the law are at present unaware of this fact. Therefore, it is referred to as being secret. The record also says, is in the middle of page 22, the 3,000 worlds of the Dharma realm may be termed secret and wonderful. Secret means strict or without a single exception. Secret means strict or without a single exception. The 3,000 worlds, every single one of them exists in one's life. I said that over and over again. The entire phenomenal realm exists in your life. That's what that's saying. That's where that comes from. There is nothing more unfathomable than this. That's why I always remind you that if you can't understand that, that's because it's called the region of the unfathomable. Even persons who are called great slanderers of the law will in time come to accept and uphold Myoho Renge Kyo. This is the purpose of the Expedient Means chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Now that we have entered the latter day of the law, Nichiren and his followers are carrying out this task correctly, to take the persons and teachings of the sutras preached prior to the Lotus Sutra and lead them into the body of teachings of the Lotus Sutra is the purpose of the Expedient Means chapter of the Lotus Sutra. So this is basically a point where all the previous teachings, now he has said in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, immediately preceding this, I have not yet in these more than 40 years yet revealed the truth, okay? And now he's talking about the subject that he is in the Lotus, okay? And what will follow is what he talks about in the Nirvana, which is really a recap of what he said in the Lotus. So that's why this is called the perfect teaching, okay? Because everything led up to the Lotus and the Nirvana, the perfect teaching, which encompass, or perfectly round, encompass all things. Okay, so it says, this is also termed the attainment of Buddhahood in one's present form, or their consistency from beginning to end. Chapter 2, the consistency of the 10 factors, the fact that we absolutely, as a natural course of events, reveal our Buddha nature, because it's always been a part of us. It's never been something that we had to acquire. It's something like the top knot or the jewel sewn into the robe that we had to discover within ourselves. That it's more than just a story, it's a reality. It's our lives. Again, the Expedient Means chapter represents the 10 worlds, or in another sense, it represents ignorance or darkness. Myoho Renge Kyo, or the Lotus Sutra, stands at the apex of the 10 worlds, and at the same time represents the Dharma nature. It exemplifies the principle that earthly desires are identical with enlightenment, that the sufferings of birth and death are identical with nirvana. There's no separation between the two, because there's no separation between anything. So you can't establish a separation between the two. The perfect teaching is regarded as identical with the truth, because it includes everything. Refers to the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, which it includes everything. Wonderful and identical with the truth are synonymous. They're the same statement. Perfect and wonderful are the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, expressed in a single word, perfect. Perfect refers to the true aspect of all phenomena. What is that? It's Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. A commentary, the annotations on Great Concentration and Insight, Volume 1, that's again Myolo, explains the word perfect by saying perfect means perfect and interfused, or perfect and full. Perfect and interfused refers to the theoretical teaching. Perfect and full refers to the essential teaching. Perfect also refers to the two practices of concentration and insight. Again, it refers to the fact that we are made up of the two elements of body and mind. The expression of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, in a single word, is the secret storehouse of the Eshin school of teachings. Now, don't forget, this is still all Dengyo talking here, right? Hang on. Myolo, pardon me, Myolo. Okay, of Eshin School of Teachings, right? Pardon me, it's Myolo. Okay, in the middle of page 23, in the character in Chinese, okay, or perfect, the outer enclosure, which is like a rectangle, okay, represents the single moment, a single moment of life, while the element, which I can't show you, which is the character contained within, literally, the number represents 3,000 realms. The principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is unfathomable. Okay, that's why it's called the region of the unfathomable, which means to really truly understand it, you can try, but you never will. You'll never completely understand it because it's something that's beyond your understanding unless you're a Buddha. This wonderful principle was never expounded in the 3 teachings previous to the Lotus Sutra, how to attain Buddhahood in your present form. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo didn't exist. This wonderful principle was never expounded in the 3 teachings previous to the Lotus Sutra, the Tripitaka teaching, the connecting teaching, and the specific teachings, what I just talked about. Therefore, it is called secret. From this, you should understand that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo represents the expedient means of the single mind or life. Myoho Renge-kyo represents the 9 consciousnesses, while the 10 worlds represent the levels from the 8th consciousness on down. And here's an asterisk here where it says single mind or life. It says here, the expedient means indicates the 3,000 realms, and the single mind or life indicates a single moment of life, as we all experience moment by moment, single microsecond by microsecond. Together, they mean the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, because these 3,000 realms only exist when a mind and a body are together. Okay? So that's why it's always about life. It's all about life. It ends at life. You go into the state of tranquility, essentially, when you die. It depends on how you've lived. But that's the whole point. You can't do anything because you don't have a body anymore. Therefore, your mind can function, but it can't accomplish anything. Do you understand? You can't achieve anything. Therefore, it is called secret. From all this, you should understand that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo represents the expedient means of the single mind or life. Myoho Renge-kyo represents the 9 consciousnesses, while the 10 worlds represent the levels from the 8th consciousness on down. You should think these matters over carefully. The Ho of Hoben may also refer to the 10 directions. The 10 directions are the same as the 10 worlds. Always remember that when we're reading this. The Ben of Hoben indicates something that is unfathomable in nature, okay? Like infinity, like numberless, numberless major worlds as in Duspartikalpas, let alone Kuan. Something that's it's beyond the phenomenal world that you live in, so that you don't have any other examples that you can actually draw from literally, right? Okay, so that's why faith is an important part, because we're talking about things that we can't possibly fathom while we're still in the 9 worlds. Point 2, regarding the words wisdom of the Buddhas, is definitely on the top of page 24, is infinitely profound and immeasurable. The door to this wisdom is difficult to understand and difficult to enter. So if any of this sounds confusing, it qualifies right here in the text that it's probably going to be a little bit, unless you take the time to consider it. Because if you consider it, it's very simple, actually. The door to this wisdom is difficult to understand and difficult to enter. Why? Because you can't let go of the things you think you already know, that you don't know. Okay? Not one of the voice hearers or Pratyeka Buddhas is able to comprehend it. Why? Because they can't give up what they already know. All right? They can't move on to Bodhisattva. This is sort of like the middle way and the 2 opposites of non-substantiality and temporary existence. It's coming up with an understanding of the truth as it exists throughout time. Not just when you're in the phenomenal realm, but throughout the time, phenomenal realm of eternity in both directions. Words and Phrases, Volume 3. So now we're back to Tentai says, first, the passage praises the true wisdom, and then it praises the provisional wisdom. True here refers to the wisdom of the Buddhas. That's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This is not the true and provisional that applies to the teachings expounded in accordance with the capacity of people, the three teachings prior to the Lotus Sutra, the Tripitaka, the connecting, and the specific teaching. Therefore, the text describes it as the wisdom of the Buddhas. It is a manifestation of the truth the Buddhas realized for themselves. For themselves. It wasn't a teaching that they read. It was a realization that they came to from their own lives. And therefore, it is called wisdom. The essence of this wisdom is, so it's not a recipe. It's a state of mind. It's a state of being, actually. Okay? For the essence of this wisdom is the three kinds of wisdom of a single mind. Infinitely profound and immeasurable are the words of praise applied to this wisdom. The true wisdom of the Buddhas is of such depth that it can clearly penetrate to the very base of universal truth. Therefore, it is described as infinitely profound. Okay, so what does infinitely profound mean? It means it's boundless, it's endless. It's a profundity that you never can completely resolve, because time and the universe is continuing to exist, and everything is still in a constant state of flux. Everything is in the universe now, once was in the universe before. Everything is in non-substantiality, once was in the universe before. Everything is in a moment-by-moment state of decay and change before it goes back into non-substantiality and circumstances arise so that it can make its advent again as whatever it is. Okay, so therefore it is described as infinitely profound, and it is of such width that it extends to the very limits of the Dharma realm, which is limitless. Therefore it is called as immeasurable, because the Dharma realm is limitless. Eminently profound and immeasurable refers to its vertical and horizontal dimensions, which are both infinite. To employ a simile, if the roots of a tree reach far down, then its branches will flourish. And if the source of a river is far away, its flow will be long-lasting. Such are the terms used to describe true wisdom. And those used to describe provisional wisdom follow the same pattern. When the sutra speaks of the door to this wisdom, okay, we all understand that's sort of like the door to this wisdom, the way that we get into this Buddhahood. How do we do that? When the sutra speaks of the door to this wisdom, it is praising the provisional wisdom. It is an expedient means that acts as a corridor to the teaching of the Buddha's enlightenment, a force that enables one to advance on one's way. One is described as a door. A door is that which one enters upon the way. The way one enters upon is the true teaching. I screwed that up. Therefore, it is described as a door. A door is that by which one enters upon the way. The way one enters upon is the true teaching, and the correct corridor leading to the way is the provisional teaching. So do you understand what that just said? You get to the provisional teaching, and then you get to the true teaching of the Lotus Sutra, right? But here it says at the beginning of this paragraph on the bottom of page 24, when the sutra speaks of the door of this wisdom, it is praising the provisional wisdom. Because in the Expedient Means chapter, we still have not revealed the truth of the Lotus Sutra of the 16th chapter of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Remember, this isn't Nichiren speaking. This is Tentai reading Shakyamuni's Lotus Sutra. Okay, that's the whole different in the read. The read changes completely once we go to the latter day of the law and the truth of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay, so that's why it sounds confusing that this wisdom is praising provisional wisdom. Why would you praise provisional wisdom? Because that's what the Lotus Sutra actually does. It praises a wisdom that is provisional because it does not reveal the truth. Okay, okay, so. So the provisional wisdom of bodhisattvas is, by the way, 7 minutes. Okay. The sutra praises the provisional wisdom by saying that it is difficult to understand and difficult to enter. It is beyond comprehension, yet we comprehend it. It is indestructibly great. It has indescribably great assistance to offer to those acquainted only with the 7 expedient means. It is beyond measuring. Only when one teaches the 10 stages of security can one for the first time be said to understand it. And that's part of 10 times 52 stages of becoming a Buddha. And when one teaches the 10 stages of development, one may be said to enter it. Here we mention only the earlier stages of the 50 stages, the stages of security, and the later stages, the stages of development, during the latter 32. During the intervening stages, one comes to realize, just as we do during the course of our practice and faith in the Gohonzon and Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, it's the same process. That's what he's trying to explain. All right, it's a different age. That's why it's a different process. Okay, during the intervening stages, one comes to realize that this wisdom is truly difficult to expound and difficult to awaken to. And I've got a little bit to go to finish this. Okay, good. The sutra, however, makes a special point of saying that none of the voice hearers or pratyeka Buddhas are able to comprehend it. It is because such persons are so heavily weighed down by their attachments, their personal beliefs, the things that they think that they know that they won't give up in order to understand something greater. Okay? It makes a special point of admonishing in him for this. This is why persons of those two stages could not attain Buddhahood. They were spoiled seeds, if you will. People of voice hearers and cause awakened ones couldn't attain Buddhahood. Buddha constantly said, but they can never attain Buddhahood. It's only when he finally gets to the Lotus Sutra, he says, but I was just kidding. They really can attain Buddhahood. This is the first time he's saying that. And that's where all of this is being revealed for the first time. Because up until this time, he said no to them. All right? On the Words and Phrases, which is Myolo, Volume 3, says, the passage that includes the words refer to its vertical and horizontal dimensions consists of a doctrine, a simile, and a reference to both true and provisional wisdom. This shows the pattern to be followed. Here, the true wisdom has been imparted as being vast in its horizontal dimensions and all-reaching in its vertical dimensions or depth. In what follows, we are to understand that the provisional wisdom should be interpreted to be extremely profound in principle, not to be just dismissed, but to not be utilized because it's not the true teaching. The interpretation of provisional wisdom is to be given in what follows, and so its characteristics are described in advance in this passage. That is why the commentary says what it does. In the passage at the very bottom of page 25, the door to this wisdom, the word "this" refers to the wisdom that is the cause of the true wisdom, mentioned earlier in the text as the wisdom of the Buddhas. If the wisdom here is likened to a door, then it must be provisional. Okay? Because you haven't entered yet, right? And cause one to enter. Open the door and cause one to enter is what the Buddhas come to do, right? Not just open the door, but cause one to enter. But if this is on page 25, now on 26, the door to wisdom, then the wisdom must be the true wisdom that results from the cause. He's talking about original cause. He's talking about Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. In this passage, therefore, the 10 stages of development are to be understood as the corridor that leads to the way. In other words, these preparatory stages of Tentai Hat. okay, were meant to be not real showing the truth, but to be getting you closer and closer to a point where you could understand the truth, okay? They were provisional. They were expedients, all right? In this passage, therefore, the 10 stages of development are to be understood as the corridor that leads to the way, perfect enlightenment, as the way itself, and the state following enlightenment as what comes after one has attained the way, Buddhahood. Therefore, one should understand that the purpose underlying this passage is to describe the cause that leads to enlightenment. Okay? Stop. I'll pause here on page 26.